jazz trumpet star of the 1930s, Nat Gonella.
The public didn't really understand jazz in those days. They just wanted the melody, and if they could hear a melody, they thought it was good. For instance, the company would pick a number, say like the Isle of Capri. Have you heard the Isle of Capri? Can you hear it now? That's the way they wanted you to play it. But I didn't want to play it that way. I wanted it to bounce along and hit the public a little bit, make them like it a bit. So, because when I made a record of it, I did that little bit of schmaltzy stuff first, and then a bit of a drum solo, bum 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 bum, and off we went. Better, isn't it? Well, it's happy music. Jazz has got to be happy music. If you take it too serious, well, then you'll never play jazz.
In the 20s and 30s, bands like these played the pop music of the time. They called it jazz, but most of it shows little resemblance to what is known as jazz today. Dance band leaders became pop heroes. Who were they, and do their public still remember them?
Hiya, cats! This is Nat Gonella, and that's me trumpet.
Oh, Nat Gonella was my favourite trumpeter, yes. Very good.
Nat Gonella is George's, remember that right enough, yes.
Don't hear much of him now.
Hello, everyone. This is Jack Payne.
Jack Payne produced some wonderful music, entertained the public.
What do I think of Jack Payne? You're very good. You all know Albert. My name is George Chisholm. Follow that.
No, I'm not so keen on them. I like Mantovani.
No, George Chisholm's modern. George Chisholm's modern.
Oh, yes, he's good. Very good.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Roy Fox speaking.
Roy Fox, one of the old ones.
Who's Roy Fox? Oh, he's a band leader, isn't it?
Of course I remember Roy Fox. One of my favourites. Very good artist.
Hello, everybody. It's me, your Hutchman-Chacha, Harry Roy. You remember this? The old mic?
Top of the pops, then.
We think they were really good in those days.
Harry Roy was too. All the old people were, all those people in those days were very good artists.
My name is Spike Hughes.
No, I can't recall Spike Hughes, not especially.
Mike Hughes? No.
But you're talking about Spike Mulligan, are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm Billy Jones, pianist with the original Dixieland Jazz Band.
Don't hear much of him now.
No.
No, he's one thing of the past. No, I can't recollect Billy Jones.
No, I didn't know him.
No. Did he play in a pop group?
Whatever happened to music? I remember in my youth when you could switch the radio on, hear good music played by good musicians, anytime. And now all you get is a lot of electric noises, listened to and played by a lot of cloth-eared kids. So who's to blame for it? I suppose I was, partly. But it happened long before me, 1919, when the original Dixieland Jazz Band came over here from America.
The original Dixieland Jazz Band wasn't really original at all. This new improvised music was first played by colored groups in New Orleans, but the all-white Dixieland Band, led by Nick LaRocca, was the first to record it in New York, January 1917. Their reputation spread, and in April 1919, they were invited to England. They were given a mixed reception, but many of the young musicians then playing in London were fascinated by this new sound. One of them was pianist Billy Jones. In the 20s, he became a publican and at one time ran the Cross Keys in Chelsea.
Yes, I learned this particular style of playing years before the Dixieland Band arrived here. The coloured boy came early 1940 and I picked up the real style from him. That's why when the original Dixieland Band arrived and claimed it was all their own compositions, their own style, I thought and really knew very differently. And LaRocca definitely claimed it was his music, white people's music. He had brought it from New Orleans to Chicago to New York and eventually to Europe, and it must be white music. He was very, very, very anti-Negro. Anyway, I was playing at a club in Bond Street, and they were drafted there to alternate with me, with my little band. And we got on very well together, all of us. One day, LaRocca approached me. He said, "Billy, would you like to sit in with us?" I said, "Why? What's the idea?" Well, he said, "Our pianist, Russell Robinson, wants to go back home. His wife isn't well, and we want a replacement." So I thought, well, I love the sound of the music, and I would welcome the opportunity. I said, "Yes, certainly." And sure enough, we got along very, very well. I played all their numbers. It came very easy to me, because their harmonies were very simple, and really there was nothing much to it. I knew it was wonderful because all we'd had in this country was string music. We had banjo and fiddle. There was nothing else but the brass effect, the cornet, trombone with the clarinet lifting the whole thing made it so exciting. I knew very nicely that it was here to stay. That I was firmly convinced of. But of course the press, they took a very different view. The press knocked it, suggested it was jungle music, and the quicker they went back home to the jungle where they came from would be better for everyone concerned.
Of course, in the early days, all the hot jazz, we had to learn it from these 78s. Breakable they were. It was a Harry boy. Jack Payne. Oh. Sorry about this. Gonella, that's one of mine. But because all the best jazz came from America, and we didn't have a lot of bands coming over here to listen to teach us all our jazz, so we had to rely on these 78s.
Spike Hughes, Times music critic for many years and author of a recent book on Glyndebourne, ran a jazz band himself 40 years ago. The climax of his jazz career was a trip to New York in the 30s, where he recorded his own music with the cream of American musicians. He first became interested in jazz while he was still a student.
I think one can date the beginning of jazz in this country, when it was really first taken seriously, about the middle 1920s. The old Dixieland jazz band had become a bit of a joke by then. And we were getting more serious things from America, bootleg records in a way. Anybody who went to the States came back with something. They came back with records by somebody called Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, we heard of him, and people like Bessie Smith, but those were very esoteric. Those were very rich young men at Oxford and Cambridge who used to go to the States every vacation and come back with this stack of things. But this Oxford and Cambridge public, sounds an odd thing to think of now, but was in fact the sort of the thing that started it all off.
The starting point for Nat Gonella was when he graduated from his school band to a theatre orchestra and toured in a show with Gracie Fields. He was supposed to play straight, but he too was listening to American jazz records and began to develop the style that was to make him one of the favourite British trumpeters of the 30s.
Georgia, 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 no peace I find just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind.
In 1935, Nat Gonella started a band of his own, known as the Georgians. They recorded over 1,000 numbers, but the most popular was always their signature tune, Georgia on My Mind.
I'm so glad you decided to come here.
It was a good guess, wasn't it?
We used to play such things as marches and overtures and a light sort of dance music, which could be the Sheik of Araby, or I love my chili bum bum, my chili bum bum, you know, real corny sort of songs. But they had to be strictly on the melody. When I used to jazz them up a bit, and the conductor was very annoyed, and people said that wasn't a real thing to do. You had to play a melody and stick to the melody. What do you think you were doing, sort of making all that horrible noise?
We're almost social outcasts. Hard to believe. We didn't mind.
In the old days, and I suppose it applies today as well, you couldn't sort of educate the public with hot music or swing music, as we used to call it. You had to dress it up, and you had to sort of give them something to look at, sort of make it visual. And therefore, their ears weren't worried about the music so much. And that's what we called commercialism. Yeah.
Band leader Jack Payne, who died in December 1969, spent his retirement in Kent. He ran one of the most commercially successful bands, the first in this country to use its own signature tune.
You probably remember that signature tune, which I've used for so many years. It's called, of course, Say It With Music. Incidentally, we never used a note of music. Every note was memorized by these 20-odd musicians of mine. But we had to put on productions to interest the people, apart from what was happening to the music. Something had to happen, too, to keep their interest. Scenic effects. We had animals. All manner of things, all manner of tricks we got up to. Every 8 bars that we played, something had to happen. Somebody had to stand up, and the whole section stood up, the trumpet players stood up, or the saxes stood up, and something had to be moving all the time to keep the interest of the public. I remember at one of the command performances we did a number called The World is Waiting for the Sunrise. So I thought to myself, now, how on earth do we do a sunrise? So I forget who thought about it. One of the mechanics, I think, at the backstage, he got hold of a bowl, an ordinary sort of washing up bowl, put an electric light in the back of it, if you understand what I mean, and put it on a piece of string or wire, tied it to one of the battens, and as we played the tune, The World is Waiting for the Sunrise, so he pulled this piece of string or wire, and up came this thing which was behind the curtain at the back of the set. So it gave the appearance the sun was rising behind the band. All those little things we used to do. Sounds very corny, I know, but it was quite effective.
In the early 30s, Roy Fox, who now lives in London, was one of the many American band leaders who came over to play and broadcast.
In 1930, I was head of the music production department of Fox Films in Hollywood. And I received a cable one day asking if I would bring my band to the Café de Paris in London. Well, I didn't have a band at the time, so after completing the deal, I scrounged around Hollywood, the different studios, and I found some of the top musicians that would like to come over here. It was only for 8 weeks. So I got this bunch of boys together, and we were going to rehearse on the ship called the Majestic, come be over here, because we didn't have an opportunity of rehearsing before the engagement started. So the only trouble with that was that I was so seasick all the way over that we couldn't rehearse. So we opened, and during the course of the conversation that night, when I went up to Jack Buchanan's table, he said, "Roy, everything is great." He said, "You know that man that you were just talking to down there that came up to ask you or talk to you?" I said, "Yes, he just asked me for a tune called Without a Song." He said, "Well, that was the Prince of Wales."
Yeah, in the early 30s, we had what we called the society set, and it was the ambition of all the bands to get into that set, and they used to play all the big hunt balls and all the hotel dances, and they got a Buckingham Palace, south of France, gambling and Rolls Royces, and it was really something, you know, to walk round at Derby Day with a top hat on. Oh, beautiful, make plenty of money.
Those days are quite different somehow from these days. There was a different atmosphere. It was all so glamorous and so exciting. Oh, it was a lovely period. I think it's a great pity things have changed as they have. So far as the dance music is concerned for these functions, Bert Ambrose was undoubtedly the daddy of them all. Bert, in my opinion, well, especially latterly when he formed his big band, had the best band in Europe, probably one of the finest in the world.
The best band needed the best musicians, and George Chisholm was one of them. He played the trombone with Ambrose in the late 30s. His first love has always been jazz, but he's better known now as a musical comedian.
The thing to do then was to slip up and say to the band leader, like an Ambrose in this case, say, "Would you play so-and-so, Ambrose?" And Bert would say, "Yes, certainly." And he'd slip a note into Bert's hand, which was invariably a £5 note or a £10 note. I mean, it was big stuff in those days. Until this one evening, this fella came up and he slipped Ambrose 10 shillings. He said, "Would you play so-and-so?" And Ambrose said, "Certainly." And he slipped a note into Ambrose's hand. Ambrose looked at it, it was 10 shillings. Which in those days was an insult to a man like Ambrose, who dealt in thousands. So Ambrose put his hand in his pocket, put £4.10 to the 10 shillings and said, "Go and buy yourself a shirt, sonny." Ridiculous. Some of the band leaders, I think they were better businessmen than they were actually musicians. They held an instrument at the front of the band and commanded a certain amount of respect by the way they held it. Some of them held it very well. But for the most part, I think they were businessmen.
There was what I suppose you really call a division in music then, which I think there is today, of course, as well, in the sense of that there was what was called hot music, which was what we were devoted to, and there was commercial dance music. And the train didn't meet for a long time, and so some of the commercial dance people, this was sort of the early 30s, thought maybe if they jumped on the bandwagon, they'd do a little bit better too. And there was some pretty curious results, because there were band leaders who had absolutely no talent, let alone any affection for the sort of music we used to do.
So every evening when we used to finish at about 1:30 or 2 a.m. in the morning, we used to pack our instruments as quickly as we could and hare it down to the Nest Club and take the mutes out and get it all out of your system. Blow yourself out till about 5, till they put the chairs up, in fact. And it was like a community. It was tremendous. It was a great affinity between these people, and most enjoyable. In fact, you could tell the day of the week by the bands who appeared on the radio. Invariably, we were muted brass all the time, very quiet, let the people hear themselves talk. But on broadcast, we had to take the mutes out because it gave the band some life, you see, transmitting to a listening audience. So in this case, whenever we were broadcasting, they used to put a large notice up at the side of the band, apologising for the fact that we were broadcasting. And apologising that it might be slightly louder than usual, but it'll only last for a short period. It was like, don't alter your set, you know, everything will be all right later. And these young bloods used to come down there and come down on broadcast nights for the sake of saying they shared in a broadcast, and also the fact that we would play some jazz, you see, and this jazz had a sort of a, let's go and hear the evil jazz, you see, evil and drink and jazz and musicians and all that, you see. It all had a big attraction for them. And they used to, in fact, follow us down to the nightclub afterwards, which was even more evil, in a nice way.
In the 30s, several American musicians visited Britain, men like Fats Waller and Louis Armstrong. These men had long been the heroes of our own musicians.
And Armstrong was, well, he was just the king. I was potty about him. He used to get his records, and I used to play him morning, noon and night. I used to get a gramophone under the bedclothes with a pin in instead of the needle, so it was very, very soft. And, of course, after a while, we heard that Louis was coming to England. This was a good thing, of course, for us, because we wanted to see him in person and hear him play this wonderful horn. Anyway, because he came to the London Palladium, where he was opening with his band, and my brother and I, we had front row seats, and the house was absolutely packed, solid. And after Louis had played probably 2 numbers, the house was empty. Just a handful of musicians that understood his jazz. Everybody else had gone away from the theatre. Because my brother and I were so annoyed that we used to trip these people up as they were going past us, think what dirty rats they were not to appreciate Louis' music. Because everybody thought he was just a big gorilla, that's all. He was coloured, and he had these handkerchiefs, and he was perspiring all the time, and he was mopping his brow and talking, like that. And of course they didn't understand him. But that was me on my downfall, I suppose. It was Armstrong all the time, and I couldn't hear a wrong word said about him.
Living way back in town, yes. Yes, she treated me right. Never let me down. But I wasn't satisfied. What did you do? I had to run around.
That's just like you, Pop.
I had also the wonderful experience of making a record with Fats Waller. This was quite something, because he was everything that he sounds on his records. This was him, and he had the largest hands ever I saw on any man. That was one fist, one hand that was, and his left hand used to go plonk down on piano keys, and where the normal man could stretch a 10th or a 12th, I think he could stretch 14, 15. Huge hands, a very jolly man. And while we were making this record, it was the time when whiskey was very short. He used to have a bottle of whiskey on top of the piano, and it went down until there was none left. And he said, right in the middle of the record, it's still on the record to this day, he said, "Go get me some John Haig, man." And this little fellow went and got it, and he played with one hand while the red light was still on and drank this whiskey. It is an amazing character.
She used to like the waltzes, so please don't play around with the walls. No, get some John Haig there, yeah. She used to dance divinely, yes, yes, yes. And I loved her so, but there I go tonight. I mustn't think of her. No more memories swing out. Tonight I must forget. Music, maestro, please.
Because the recording measures were a lot different those days. They had a sort of big wax, was probably about inch and a half, 2 inches thick, and this the sort of needle went onto this wax and made grooves as it went round and round, and recorded your music. And I used to play my trumpet very often 30 or 40 yards away from the microphone, because they were afraid if you blew too loud, you'd make a big hole into the wax, and of course the record would come out most horrible, I suppose.
Some of the successful musicians of those days made a great deal of money, and Harry Roy was one of the most successful. He made thousands of records, appeared in several films, travelled the world, and was constantly in the headlines. He still plays his kind of music in clubs like Sherry's Ballroom in Brighton. Harry Roy began by playing in his brother's band, but as soon as he formed a band of his own, it seemed he couldn't go wrong.
Well, it started as soon as the first broadcast. Instead of earning £200 or £300 a week, I started earning £1,000 a week. And the more broadcasts we did, we sold more records. Then the records went in hundreds of thousands. And then we had plug money. Each Friday night, I used to get in plug money about £500, £600, sometimes more, just for one night. And if it wasn't for the BBC allowing us to do it, not supposed to, we couldn't exist with a big band. It was impossible.
got the blues. Everything is down in Harlem. Ever since her man's in jail, he can't even write him letters, and they won't let him out on bail for bail. Devils would like to be angels if all their sins they could lose. Not a soul in town kicks their tongue around since black men is got the blues.
Well, it's great at first, but then it doesn't make you happy. Money never makes you happy because you got everybody. When I was a big name, all of a sudden I felt that people didn't like me anymore. That he's earning too much money, he's doing this and he shouldn't do that. And then you start to slide, and you slide with them. And having a lot of money, really, it spoils you. I think you don't know what to do with it, and you start to do things you shouldn't do, like gambling and poker, lots of girls in one night, and parties, drink. Then you're tired and fed up with the whole thing and say, my God, I must get married. This won't last, I can't stand it. So eventually I got married to Princess Pearl, the only white Raja in the world. And we met at a party. I didn't know who she was until about 6 months later, when I saw the photograph in the family, the Queen's magazine.
Yes, madam? I ordered toast and coffee 10 minutes ago.
Beautiful.
I beg your pardon?
I mean, we serve beautiful coffee, madam. The finest in London. I bring it immediately.
Thank you.
Excuse me, sir.
It was lovely. Then we went to South America, that was great. And then the war started, and like most marriages, it went on the rocks. And I'm much happier now that I'm broke. Not broke, but I'm much happier. I've got a few bob left, but I wouldn't like all that money again because I was going and be a gambler again. Get bored again. I'm not bored, I like playing, and I like writing music, I like to compose, I've written a lot of numbers. But now I'm glad to work because writing music all the time and doing nothing else gets very boring. I like to meet people again. Since I've been here, I've met a lot of old friends.
I think jazz is meant, honestly, is meant to be enjoyed by everyone. It should be fun and without fun, as I say, without funny hats and everything else. It's a music to be enjoyed. It's a way of life, I think, jazz. It is to me, anyway.
I mean, it's got to be happy music. You've got to be, if you're with a girl or partner, you can swing around and jump about, you can talk, and really, of course, you've got to be happy. It mustn't be too serious. You get enough serious music with the overtures and the operas and things like that. If you want to relax your brain on that sort of stuff, you've got plenty of those places to go to and hear that. But jazz, keep it happy.